The gold in them thar hills may be long gone, but Ruby, Arizona is still a gem of a ghost town. This once bustling mining camp is way off the beaten path and now boasts just one permanent resident.
I'm off the grid, out of the system. There's no traffic noise or barking dogs or noisy neighbors to deal with here. Surrounded by the natural world.
Sundog is the caretaker for this privately owned town south of Arivaca. He enjoys the solitude, but welcomes the occasional visitor.
An old Mexican man came last summer and said that his father's brother had built the jailhouse door there. He was just an itinerant blacksmith going from camp to camp doing little jobs. So yeah, people show up here that were associated with the place, and because I'm here all the time, I'm the one that gets to talk to them. And you know, sometimes I take their name, or I say, "Well, Ty, I would love to talk to you."
Grover Duff was the mine superintendent and a very tough taskmaster.
Taya Cahoon is also a Ruby enthusiast and an official tour guide.
When I've done oral histories with people who lived here, if I mention the name Duff, you can almost see the hair stand up on the back of their neck because they remember what he was like.
This 76-year-old mother of two has been giving tours through Pima Community College for over 10 years.
I don't ever have a time when I think, oh my gosh, I've got to go to Ruby tomorrow. It's never a downside to me. It's always fun. And it just tickles me pink to see these people light up when you tell them some of the history of this area. At its peak, the mine operated 7 days a week with over 300 men working 3 8-hour shifts per day.
Taya knows the history of Ruby like the back of her hand. She's even co-authored a book titled Ruby.
I've always wondered who lived there and what they did, what type of work they did, their family life, and that sort of thing. I've always had interest in ghost towns.
She's collected many an oral history from folks who remember living there in its heyday.
One of the things that people have said to me that I've interviewed, they've said, you know, life was hard out there, but it was a good life.
Although it was gold and silver that brought prospectors to the area in the 1840s, it was lead and zinc that became a cash crop for the Montana mine. After the Depression, the town grew to 1,200 before all was said and done.
History is so important, and I might add here that when I was in school, I don't ever remember enjoying history. I hated history because it was out of a book, and it was dry, and it was boring, and who cared? You know, if you had to memorize 10 dates, who cared about those dates? How was I ever going to use those?
Now she uses every little speck of information she can find to bring Ruby back to life.
This is called a shotgun house because of its architecture, and the rooms are 14 feet wide and 12.5 feet long.
There's not much left here except the walls and the knowledge that a family once lived here.
This was the bedroom, and my parents' bed was right here.
Taya spent her first 9 years in Ruby, a town that was all about community.
Everybody was interested in everyone else, and there wasn't any distance between the people. Everybody was a friend. I palled around with Rita Otero. She was my very closest friend in all the world.
But it was memories of a 2-room schoolhouse that flickered across her face like it was the first day of class.
School was a very pleasurable time for me. I liked it very much. The first grade was on one side of the room, second grade on the other side of the room. I remember being quiet. If a person was caught talking, that was a major infraction of the rule.
Taya was not one given to breaking the rules.
I was absolutely forbidden to go on that slide.
Her mother was afraid she'd get hurt.
So I went ahead and I climbed up, and I got to the top, and I wanted to climb back down because I was afraid. And I was thinking what my mom had said, don't go down the slide.
But everyone else in the school, it seemed, was lined up behind her, and they wanted to go.
And so I went ahead and went down, and I had the ride of my life.
By the time she reached the bottom of that slide, someone else knew all about it.
And when I got home, my mother said, "I understand you went down the slide today." And I thought, oh God, here I go again. You know, explaining why I went down the slide. She didn't punish me, but, you know, she didn't spank me, but she said, "You're going to fall and hurt yourself." And I never did go down again.
But she did, again and again, if only in her mind.
To me, Ruby is a fond memory. Everything about it.
What started out as a simple quest to capture her family history became a book and then a passion. It's memories that keep this old ghost town alive.
From the outside looking in, curious conversations about color, texture, heat, and opacity can be overheard. Window shoppers are welcome, but it's inside that the unknown can mingle, although carefully, with well-known artists.
So that if the leaf tends to separate anywhere, you get that bright red shining through. Listen, the Chinese have done it for 5,000 years.
Ingenious, isn't it?
Glass artist Mark Fowler started out as a painter and photographer, but there was something about glass that caught his attention.
It's a pain to work with. I mean, it really is a challenge. There's nothing easy about it. For me, that's it. It's really intriguing. It does a lot of different things. It can look like stone, or it can look like what you generally think of as glass.
Transparent, translucent, opaque, but always unique. This glass artist from Rock Island, Illinois takes his cue from nature in an abstract sort of way. He's in Tucson because
This whole thing started like 35 years ago, this studio movement. And, I mean, it's just amazing. There's a handful of people that really have promoted the material and the use of it and the way you work and as a team, and he's one of them.
It's so nice to see you. Thanks for stopping. It's great.
the he Fowler is talking about is Tom Philibon, Tucson's very own glass man.
I came to Tucson because I wanted to be this wild sculptor in a loincloth, working outdoors and creating things with clay and wood and what have you.
But it was the glass bug that bit the hardest. Within 7 days of moving here, he found a studio.
And then I met Dabney and we got pregnant, and so I wanted to make a living, and I couldn't make things out of clay to make money, but I was selling my wine goblets and tumblers and paperweights at 4th Avenue street fairs and at the museum. And so I started making a living making utilitarian things. It's like inflating a balloon. Right now, the walls are real thick at this point. Go ahead, Steve.
Tom started dabbling in art in high school. He originally thought he'd be a minister or a professional football player. His mind was made up for him in college when he almost flunked out.
My goal really was to be a college professor teaching art. I think my dad never understood my decision to study art. The one thing that he would accept was that I became a teacher, and that was acceptable. But the art part was not easy to understand. Stop. Let's try it again, Hodge. Are we there? Yeah, we're there. Good. Now, if he were still alive, he would love it because I've got a business and because I'm a salesman, and my dad was a great salesman. And those are the things I miss, is not having my parents see what we're doing now. That would be great. Up. It's really soft. I'm not having to give it any pressure at all. Just a little bit more right there. No, we're good, Steve. A little air in the neck, please. Okay.
Tom did teach art to elementary school kids for a while, but that wasn't to be his destiny.
I made a conscious decision at some point in the early 80s that if I was going to do this and follow through, one, I had to overcome fear of failure, and second, fear of success. Because if I did make something of this, then there would be success. And how do you handle success?
Philibom has become one of the most prolific glass artists in the country. He admits that he's somewhat of a zealot.
Whenever I talk to young people, I always say, keep your goals simple, but keep your vision pure, be true to your art. And I guess that's paid off. That's what I've been after, and that's what I've accomplished. Okay, I got it, Hodge. There it is. It's alive. That's the neat thing about glass. When you're working on it, it's hot, it's alive, you know. Beautiful. Nice, Dan. The glass dictates. You know, the thing to always remember about glass is that you're not really in charge. You're guiding the glass through the process because it has its limitations. Glass definitely will tell you, okay, that's it, that's enough, stop there, you can't do that. But it's also elastic. In plastic, it can move and stretch. All right. Okay, here we go. With glass, your decision making is now, now, now. That's good. Okay. Once you start working with the glass, it gets cold, and you have to heat it up again, and so there are limitations, but you learn to work with that.
Spinning, spinning, spinning. The dizzying precision is like a dance.
Monsieur Bouton?
And Philibom leads.
When we get in a flow, when things are going well, there's a physical rhythm, and there's kind of almost an emotional rhythm, because everybody on the team knows that we're in sync, you know, and everybody's doing their part to make something really beautiful work. That looks good. Nice heat.
Like any relationship, there's give and take. Whether it's your nostrils being singed or the crunch of glass shards under your feet.
We'll get it in the next one. When you start a career in art, everything you make is muy precioso. It's very important, you know. I've made so many tens of thousands of things that they're not my children anymore. So we just say, oh, that's glass. And then you have to move on. It's a great life metaphor. All right, won't take much on an opening up, Steve. That's good, Hodge. Won't take much. You can't get too wrapped up in it. If something breaks, it breaks. Then move on, make another one. I rue the day when I can't make any more stuff. Oh man, it's so hot. This won't take long.
But after many injuries and several surgeries, even he admits it's a young man's game.
It's a challenge. Glass is a real big challenge. I never thought I would spend my life doing this. It's taken me away from my family at times in different ways. My kids, when we talk about our life together before they left home, they never seem to mind. They seem to understand. I guess we're all born with guilt, so I think I was never a good enough father, or never a good enough husband. But we're still really tight, so I guess we did okay.
It's family, and all the people who have come through his studio over the years, and there are a lot of them, that have played a strong role in his development.
Air on the lip, please. It's very nice. I've created a world that, to me, is interesting and fun and worthy of sharing with people, and brings people to new awarenesses. We can't rest on our lofty ideals, but those lofty ideals have to be there as the groundwork. You know, even here, you know, my goals here are first to make something, some kind of art statement. make something beautiful. There's nothing wrong with beauty. If you have a roof over your head, and you have people who love you and people to love, and there's not much more in life, I don't think. What a catch. Lovely. Well done. Haji Bon Jovi, folks. Bon Jovi.
Little vapor coming off the Institute there. If I had batteries, I'd get the airplane flying around up there too.
Ned Shaper is a wizard,
Everybody's coming on here.
loose in a warehouse.
It's actually going by in this sea of smoke.
In his kingdom, the unrelated enjoy a curious harmony.
But those scissors went on there. It was a total accident.
It is a universe where the found and discarded
This is made out of coat hangers.
have purpose,
All right.
where a mechanical maestro sets his own stage.
There we go. You just think of Hanna-Barbera cartoons mixed with, a mad Shakespearean scientist.
Every floating, flying, and rotating gizmo has a story.
Like, this shouldn't be here.
In fact, there are hours of stories these machines can tell.
Poetic inserts are mere cliches. I've had to chit-chat many days. In Tucson, people think Matt Bevel is me, but really Matt Bevel he's a mythical character that took them off the beveled map.
This palace of the profound may not be open regular hours.
This, of course, is chicken pox.
A webcast TV will one day bring Bevel Vision to the world.
The point of the story is that it flies off the bevel of the mat and takes the people to higher dimensionalities. You sort of have to see the whole thing I need to see the whole thing to understand it.
If it sounds complicated, there is a common law by which this universe revolves.
When you start working with materials of the world, they just sort of tell you what you're supposed to do in life.
A law that begins making sense.
When you get yourself out of your brain and what you think you're supposed to do and what you're told what you're supposed to do and all your expectations, you really find out that if you just start working with things, this sort of direction is opened up to you. Hey, flicker, stick around. Be here when I come back down.
A gadget guru and his machines, who can imagine the world taking care of itself.
You want to be able to use the materials that you have at hand, and that is the true form of intelligence that we really need in the world right now, creative intelligence.
A clattering universe that lives in a downtown warehouse.
It's like I tell people, if you don't believe in magic, give me 15 minutes in here.
Only one time we had to land at the river sheriff field. All our hydraulics were shot out.
That's exactly what happened to us.
We had to crank down the gear.
What was your shooting down day?
November 30th.
You went down?
Yeah,
you
went
went
down.
10 hours?
These are the stories of the men who lived to tell it.
Coming home, they ran out of gas, like we usually did on those French raids.
They're serious stories, but some of the pain has faded.
I was on the mission that he was shot down on March the 6th, 1944.
Yeah.
First full daylight raid on Berlin. I watched him go down. And I was the only one finishing my tour of duty that day in our group, and the only one shot down.
And it was.
These are the men of the 390th Bomb Group. They served their country proudly during World War II.
You saw an airplane go down, you thought, oh, they're gone, and that was it. You never thought you'd see them again.
Unless, of course, you do see them again. More than 60 years later, there's fewer and fewer of them at this reunion every year.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah.
But those that are left still gather underneath the wings of a B-17 Flying Fortress, and they still have many stories to tell.
When I saw this airplane coming through with flashes off his wings, I said, "Oh my God, he's shooting at me!" You know, my knees got a little weak, I'll have to admit. And he went through so fast that I didn't even get a chance to fire at him. And we lost 2 airplanes out of our formation that day. So.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming in.
The plane is a centerpiece of the museum as far as people coming in to look at things is concerned. But this museum is really a legacy to the courage of the people that flew in the 390th Bomb Group as well as the rest of the 8th Air Force.
Initially, a tour of duty was 25 missions. 2 out of 3 crews would be shot down in 1942, 1943. Only 1 in 3 would complete a tour of duty.
Everything we do here is dedicated to telling people what they went through, how they did their job, and what they endured to secure our freedoms today.
Tom Drugan is the executive director of the 390th Memorial Museum Foundation. The museum is located on the grounds of the Pima Air and Space Museum. He knows all too well that it was not an easy freedom to secure, but despite the hardships, men lined up to join.
Most of them really had no concept that it was that dangerous, and when they were drafted or volunteered for service, they saw the glory in flying that they had read about or in the movies, and they were drawn to it. Maybe if they had known the dangers, there wouldn't have been so many.
10% of the men who flew in the 8th Air Force were killed, but that didn't stop men from volunteering, especially young men.
Most of the crews averaged around 18 to 22. My own brother, when he went in, he was a pilot. I think it's a young man's job. Older people have more sense than to do some of these things that they had to do. So the young fellows are the ones that carry the brunt of it.
His father understood this, but his brother did not.
In 1943, my brother came into the house and told us that he would volunteered to go into the Air Force. And my father had a fit. They had a big argument, and my brother Donnie left the house, and that's the last we ever saw of him.
From that time on, his father refused to talk about Donnie. Tom was only in the 3rd grade, so he never really got to know him.
About 8 years ago, my son and I were here in the museum just touring around because we like airplanes. And I was on one side of the museum, and he's over here in the corner, and he came running over and said, "Dad, there's a photograph here with our name on it." So I went over and looked at it, and I immediately recognized my brother because he looked exactly the same as the last time I saw him. When he went in the service, we got photographs of him in his uniform. I remember feeling like, this is my big brother, and I'm so proud of him. It never occurred to me that he wouldn't come back home.
After flying only 4 missions, his plane was shot down in October 1944.
It was flak. He got hit in one wing with flak. It exploded in the wing. The wing collapsed, and the plane went into a spin.
Flak was a big problem for the B-17s. Veteran Vern Hutt recounts his first mission with the 390th.
Well, just everybody was scared to death. They'd never been on a mission before, their first mission. Flak was going through that waist like a .22 rifle, wing. That's pretty thin skin on that deal there. But anyway, we survived that anyway. Got back.
They weren't so lucky down the road.
We had flown 4 missions. The mission we flew that day, we had dropped our bombs in Kassel, Germany. It was on our way back between Cologne and Koblenz on the Rhine River when flak hit us, first up in the nose, the next thing in the wing. It just split the wing wide open. And I had my chute on, and the ball turret gunner came up out of the ball, and I grabbed his straps trying to get his harness on. That's the last I think I knew. It exploded. The wing came off and it exploded right in the air. The good Lord took me out of there, I guess, and When I came to, I looked up and my chute was wide open. How it got open, we don't know that either.
Vern came down in a heavy forest, caught between two trees. He had to use his pocket knife to cut himself loose. He fell about 40 feet, shattering his ankle. He feels like he was lucky.
Every day I think about that. I think how fortunate I was, very fortunate to be one of the 4 out of 9 that had survived, because the other guys didn't have a chance. It just all happened so fast, and that they couldn't get out.
One of those who didn't make it was the pilot.
And I'd been working here as a volunteer for probably several months, and they knew my story here. And one of the fellows said, well, you know, there's a guy here that got blown out of an airplane, and he's one of 3 or 4 survivors. Maybe he knows something about your brother. So I contacted Vern, and it turned out that Vern was the waist gunner on the plane that my brother was flying at the time that he was shot down. And he was blown out of the airplane and wound up unconscious and drifted down and was captured and became a POW. But here suddenly I came across a guy that had actually flown with my brother and knew him as a crewmate. And that developed into a really great friendship.
I think every day about the whole crew that didn't come back. It was pretty hard to take. When I came back and went to work, and it's kind of like a dream today to think that this all happened. There were so many casualties, so many that didn't get back.
I want them to take an understanding of what really happened in the air war over Germany, and an appreciation for the fact that the fellows sacrificed their youth to make it happen. And that's exactly what they did. The young men came back after this experience with their youth left behind them. They matured in a way that nobody will ever do that again. No one will ever fight a war like that one was fought, with these aluminum airplanes so far above the ground with no heat, constant danger. I want them to know that these fellas did this out of love of their country.
It's homier.
It's showier.
It's spicier.
It's easier. Downtown, it's happening.